Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys have had a lovely week. I know mine has been pretty freaking crazy, but we're alive, we're here, and we're gonna talk about books. Today we are going to be doing a giant book haul. I have accumulated over 50 books since the beginning of the year, which it may be a problem, but you know, I get a lot of my books used, so you know, maybe we shouldn't think about it as a problem, but more like I'm saving the books. Anyway, so a lot of the books I do get are used, so I kind of have divided this into like where I bought them or got them from. Some of them I bought from used bookstore, Barnes & Noble. I got them from book subscription boxes. I was given one or two. I'm probably missing a couple in this video. So the first books I'm going to talk about today is actually a trilogy, and that is the Chronicles of the Imaginarium Geographica. The first book is Here They Be Dragons. Then there is The Search for the Red Dragon and the Indigo King. I don't know why I can't read today. It's really a problem. This is going to be a long video if I can't read. So this series is by James A. Owen. Basically, we are following three strangers that come together due to an unusual murder, and that is John, James, and Charles. And this is all set during like the World War I time era, and basically this little man named Bert comes to them and he's like, hey, you guys are the new keepers of the Imaginarium Geographica, which is a giant atlas of all of the mythical and legendary lands, and he says that you can travel to these lands via the Indigo ship. Thus begins a giant journey of them being chased out of London due to this crazy murder, I guess, and an adventure of dragons and traveling mythical lands, and I don't know, it sounds really freaking awesome. Dragons, traveling, not to mention these covers. Like, these are used, so they're beat up, but honestly, I think that makes them even more beautiful. But like, dragons? Sold me. The next book is part of a very popular series. I got The Words of Radiance, or I think it's just Words of Radiance, by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Stormlight Archive. Side note, I really like to say that I'm going to read this soon because it sounds really good, and here you see most of these books have never been read. I have a problem saying I'm gonna do it and then I don't because I'm a mood reader. So I'll be like, I'm gonna read that, and then I'll be like, just kidding, not in the mood. Just fair warning. So the Stormlight Archives, I really don't know how to explain to you. The synopsis is really long. There's a lot of characters. It's a whole different world. Honestly, I'd say just Google the synopsis, but even me reading the synopsis, I was like, huh? I feel like it's one of those books you just need to dive into. So we are going to dive into it this year because I really want to read Brandon Sanderson, and I think I want to start with the Stormlight Archives. I'm sure crazy Sanderson lovers are like, there's an order to read them. I don't know. I just know that this sounded really, really, really cool, and I'm going to read it. What did I just say? The next books I got, let's hope that I don't drop them all. Let's see. Will they come in the picture? I got books 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, and 14 in the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. I'm just going to hold up one of these because they're really heavy. This series was sold to me as the TV show Supernatural, but like in a book. I don't really know how else to explain it. That I read the synopses of the entire series and I've been collecting them, and it very much sounds like he just hunts and solves murders and mysteries that deal with the supernatural. The next two books I got are part of the same trilogy. I only got books 1 and 2, and let me tell you, addiction to book buying is fueled when your mother comes with you. I'm just saying, you get her in the bookstore with me and she's pulling every book off the shelf. Look at this one, look at this one, look at this one. I'm like, Miss Girl, do you see my cart? I already have like 30 books in it and you are not helping. So some of these books here are because of her. You can't yell at me about it. Anyway, the series that I am talking about is the Dragon Master trilogy, book 1 being the Dragon Master, and book 2, the Knighthood of the Dragon. So this series follows Hal, and he is a runaway pauper in a kingdom, and when he was younger he had the experience of bonding a dragon. So war comes in these lands, and the most fearsome, gruesome, battle guys. You know, they ride these dragons, and he is adamant that he is going to be the greatest dragon master of them all. It's dragons again, okay? If you haven't gotten the hint already in this video, I'm obsessed with dragons. And sometimes old classic fantasies, they just hit different, alright? That's what you're gonna see on this channel. I read some of the new stuff, but I have a lot of backlist books, and I honestly think they're better. I said what I said. The next book I'm so excited about, alright? I'm on book 7 of this series, and this series is like 40 something books. It's like a bunch of different little series, but if you put them all together, it's one giant one, and that is The Legend of Rites. Alright, if you're a D&D fan, or not even a D, like, I had never played D&D. I discovered this guy from one of my booktubers. I'm obsessed with Rites de Erden, alright? He is my favorite character that will ever character in any book. I said that. I saw this one and I said, ah, I don't own that one. So this is book 1 to the Neverwinter saga, and I believe if you put them all in like chronological order, it's book 23 in The Legend of Rites, but that is Gauntlgrim. Guys, I can't even tell you how much I love Rites, alright? Like, you have to read them. They are, like, the friendship. I cry in every book just because it's so good. And I'm not usually a crier, okay? I don't like boo-hoo over books. But there's just something about the fantasy and the writing. His frickin' writing is the best thing I've read, okay? I'm obsessed with this series. It has very, you know, classical fantasy tropes in it, but it's really like he's trying to find his way in a world that he doesn't feel like he belongs. So the whole series is like big, giant, crazy things are happening, but it's really you're just following this character trying to find his place in the world. He's just trying to find friends. He's trying to find the meaning of life because he comes from this really dark race, the Drow, and these are like dark elves that live in the Underdark, and he basically despises the way his people live, and he's like, this is disgusting. I feel feelings and I can't live like this. So he flees and he goes to the surface realm where he has to adjust to the racism and the hate that he gets. But, you know, along the way he gets these friends and he does these journeys, and his battle scenes, honestly, I need to shut up about it or we're just going to talk about Rites the entire video, because it's, again, my favorite thing ever to have been read. The next books that I have, you can thank my mother, again, she's an instigator, but these are the Books of Pelennor, and they are by Alison Croghan. I told you I'm bad with names. Anyway, book 1 is The Naming, and then I got book 2, The Riddle, and book 3, The Crow. To be honest, I hate these covers. I am not really like a people on the cover kind of girl. They're not my favorite, but it sounds really good. My mom picked them up and said, let's get these, and I said, you're crazy. I have so many books in the cart right now. And then I read the back. I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for good fantasy. This series is following a young girl, and at a young age she was sold into slavery. Little does she know that she actually has a very powerful gift that's going to admit her and mark her into the school of Pelennor. Here she finds a powerful bard that becomes kind of like her advisor or her mentor. And from there, powerful forces and dark things are happening, and her mentor have to find a way to survive with her powerful gift and learn to, you know, I guess, be able to control it. It sounds good. I know, like, I'm a sucker for classic fantasy tropes, you know, like Chosen One got a powerful gift, came from a bad background. I'm sold. I'm sold. The next books I got, I actually already owned books 3 and 5 too, and I owned book 1 and 2 in a little omnibus with the movie edition cover, but I didn't like it, so I got books 1 and 2, and then I got the rest of the series, and that is The Last Apprentice by Joseph Delaney. So this is a young adult fantasy series, and basically in this world we have old Gregory, and he is the spook of the town. He basically rids the town of evil entities like creatures and witches, and he needs a new mentor. There have been, I believe it says 29 apprentices before our main character, and they've all died or they've left. So here comes young Thomas, and Thomas becomes an apprentice to old Gregory. And thus begins a giant journey of him learning the ways of a spook. There's a movie based off of this called The Seventh Son. I personally really liked it. hence why I started collecting the series that it was based off of. So I feel like I'm gonna get some hate for this, but I have actually never read Percy Jackson by Rick Riordan. I did buy them more recently off of Amazon. They're somewhere in this general area, whatever. But I was at my little used bookstore. Got the entire set of the Heroes of Olympus, and on top of that I got the entire Trials of Apollo series. So that's 10 books total. I now think I own most of the Percy Jackson world. I'm excited to dive into this world because I may be older, but I need to know the hype, okay? I don't think I really need to explain what Percy Jackson's about because I'm sure everyone knows who Percy Jackson is. Hopefully, if not, Google it because it's all over the internet. The next couple books I have are still from the used bookstore, but they are not fantasy, if that makes sense. And I promise I didn't buy all of these books in one go. That would have made me look crazy. Did I buy most of them in one go? Maybe. We're not going to talk about that. The next book I have is the works of Alfred Lord Tennyson, and he was a poet, I believe. Well, he has a lot of poems in this, so this is like poems and all of that. The only reason I bought this big fat book is because I just recently read another book, The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. We're gonna have to talk about that a different time because I have some colorful words to say about that book. But the one good thing that came out of it, they talked a lot about this Alfred Tennyson guy and his in memoriam. I guess he had like a really hard life and he wrote this really sad, depressing poem. And me, being me, I was like, sad and depressing? Where is it at? So I went and got his poems. Will I ever actually read this whole thing? Probably not. But I do want to go read the poems that were in it that are from that book. I can't tell you what any of them are about. It's just accumulation. And the flop is so good. The next book I have is No Exit by Taylor Adams. I believe there's a TV show or a movie adaptation of this now. I'm not quite sure. I actually previously had a copy of this. We had a giant mold problem and it was the one book. Thank God, because I have a lot of books. It was the one book that I had to throw away. And I felt like such an evil person doing it. But I got a smaller edition that will fit on my shelves easier, so that's kind of exciting. This book follows a college student named Darby Thorne, and she's basically traveling to go see her dying mother, and she gets stuck in a giant snowstorm in the Colorado Rockies. So she goes to this little rest station and she's stuck there with 4 strangers. She tries to leave the rest station to go get signal out in the storm, and she comes across a van and there is a small child locked in the van in a cage. So someone she's with is a kidnapper, and things just escalate from there, and she has to figure out who she can trust to get herself out and this child. And I think this whole book takes place in about 13 hours. And I've heard people read this in like one sitting because it's so suspenseful and fast-paced. The next book I have is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, and I have heard that this is disturbing and good. So we are following 4 American Indian friends, and they were, I guess, childhood friends, and some crazy stuff happened when they were younger, and now I guess they're adults, and something from their past is coming back for revenge because they've left behind their culture and traditions. That's really all I know about this. The last 2 books I have from the used bookstore are part of the Gravekeeper series by Darcy Coates. So I have book 3, The Twisted Dead, and book 4, The Hollow Dead. I believe these came out in the last 2 years. Darcy Coates is one of my favorite horror writers. On this channel, I will bring her up in a lot because I read a lot of horror and she's one of my favorites. But basically we're following this girl and she's homeless and she ends up taking refuge in a graveyard, and she can see the dead, and there's I believe it's a woman who she keeps seeing, and this woman is hell-bent on getting her. So that's a really bad synopsis. I haven't looked at the synopsis in a hot minute, but from what I remember, that's what it's about. And I heard it just escalates and it gets crazy, and again, I love Darcy Coates. Now, that's it for used books that I've gotten. from the bookstore, but I did get The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins from my aunt. She gave me this, and I honestly don't know what this is about. This is a movie. I don't really feel like explaining it because I feel like it's a pretty popular book and a lot of people know what it's about. I know it's like thriller mystery-esque. Yeah, so reading the synopsis, I don't know what it's about still. It doesn't really say much of anything, but I have heard it got a lot of really good reviews in as far as like the book and the movie, so I'll have to read it at some point. The next book I actually got from Barnes & Noble on a little date day, and it's The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, and I am very excited to read this, and I actually will, guys, be reading this one soon because it was on a lot of my favorite booktubers best books of 2024. So basically we have a murder that happens, and the murder is really unusual as far as the circumstances and almost impossible because they have like a tree that grows out of them. So assigned to investigate is Anna Delabra, and she is a detective who has a really high reputation for being brilliant, and she can like solve these mysteries super well. And she gets this new assistant. I don't know how to say his name. I'm gonna say that it's Dinios. And he has his own secrets. So he's realizing that she's super smart, like everyone has said, but he's so scared that she's gonna find out his secrets. And obviously I don't know his secrets, I gotta read the book. But I was hooked at the first sentence when it talks about a tree erupting from a body. I said, okay, that's the kind of murder I like. The other book that I did get from Barnes & Noble was Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. I don't have it physically because my grandma is actually borrowing it. I read it on release day. We'll talk about that another time. But for those of you that don't know, this is the third book in the Empyrean series, and the first book being Fourth Wing. Been very hyped up the last 2 years. So in this series you're following a young girl named Violet Sorrengail, and she has to get into the Writer's Quadrant, which means she has to do all these crazy things. Honestly, if you have seen or read Divergent, think Divergent but dragons. Like, she's trying to get into Dauntless, but there's dragons. So once she gets into this, you have to bond a dragon or you die. So it's very like college based. I don't really know what else to say about it other than you should read it. It's worth the hype. Like I said, some of the other books are questionable, but overall it's a good story. It's a fun time. You're not here for good writing, you're here for the vibes. The next quite a few books are from Book Outlet. Again, I'm not sponsored by anyone here, I'm just gonna shout them out. The first book I got is The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle, and I'm super excited for this one because it's a short horror novella and I heard it's Lovecraftian. So basically we have Charles Thomas Tester, and he kind of does some side hustles in Harlem, and he knows magic. Like, he can tell all these magical things, and he delivers an occult book to someone and basically catches the attention of things that should be left alone. And there goes a downward spiral of dark things coming to rise, I guess. I don't really know. Horror novellas really don't tell you much about them because it's a novella and they're short. You don't want to spoil anything, but I've had my eye on this one for a really long time. So when I saw it on Book Outlet for really cheap, I said, that's mine. The next book I have is Where He Can't Find You by Darcy Coates. So basically we're following Abby, and in this book there are lots of murders that are happening by someone, and this someone is dismembering bodies and then sewing them back together in really weird ways. And so it's kind of a talk on, is it a serial killer? Is it something else? And Abby and her sister Hope are the main characters, I guess, and Hope goes missing and she's taken by, they think, this, whoever, this or that, you know. And so Abby and her friends are in a race to get her sister back before she gets sewn back together and dismembered. The next book I have is Leech by Hiron Enns. This follows an institute in a chateau. It's a medical institute, and they're raising some of the top, most elite doctors, and a parasite of some kind starts, and they just have to deal with that, I guess. I haven't heard much about this. I think one of my booktubers hated this book. but I'm very excited for it still. So we'll see. We're gonna jump into some more fantasy again. And the next book I have is The Fall of Babel by Josiah Bancroft. And this is book 4 in the Senlin Ascend series. This series follows Senlin and his wife, and they go to this world. It's just giant tower, and every level has different bureaucracies and politics and societies and different things like robots and all kinds of fantasy things. And he ends up losing his wife. So the whole first book, I guess, is him having to travel through these different layers higher and higher up to find his wife. And I heard it gets really intense, and I've always been very intrigued by the idea of it, so I'm very excited to actually read the series. The next book is The God Is Not Willing by Stephen Erickson. This is a follow-up series to the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which I've heard very good things about. I own book 1. I've not read them or dived into that, but I saw this for cheap and I said, all right. Plus the cover, it's giving. I love it. So this basically follows the events of that series. I really don't want to read much about the back because I don't want to spoil it for you guys. I don't want to spoil it for myself, but I guess things start coming again. And I've just heard that the original series is very Lord of the Rings-esque. The next book I have to talk about is The Cradle of Ice by James Rollins, and this is book 2 in the Moonfall series. And this follows a very smart student, and they foretell of an apocalypse. And with that, they form an alliance with a drunken prince, a broken soldier, and a thief. And they must solve some untold mysteries of the kingdom. That's really all I know, and it sounds great. I believe these are also on Kindle Unlimited the last time I checked, but you know how they change their stock, so I would check. The next book is The Daughter's War by Christopher Bullham. I don't know how to say his name, but this is a prequel book to The Black Tongue Thief by the same author, and it follows, I want to say, Galva, and she, against her family's wishes, joins the army, and this is called the Raven's Night, and they fight against the goblin hordes. But to get more power, they fight alongside these dark raven creatures called corvids, and so it's very much we have to ally with these powerful creatures that could kind of turn on us thing just to fight the goblin horde. The next book, also sorry about the sun, I've been recording this all day. I've been having issues with my camera, so it's now later in the day. Maybe I'll hold it like this. The next book I have is Moonbound by Robin Sloan, and this was on one of my favorite booktubers, Wrapped of 2024, and it is giving sci-fi fantasy. We're basically following a character named Ariel, and this is set thousands of years, I think 10,000 years from now, and he runs into an entity that is from an earlier civilization that ends up becoming the narrator of this story, and through that they learn all about the world and what all has happened in the universe, and it just sounds very whimsical and fun from what I've heard about it. So I also love this cover. It's really pretty. It's giving Wizard of Oz in a way. The next book I have is Rabbits by Terry Miles, and this is about an alternate reality game called Rabbits, and it's very mysterious. No one really knows, but there's been 10 rounds previously, and the winners are told to have gotten like these great fortunes, like getting into the CIA or immortality or winning the lottery and getting rich. So comes our main character Kay, and she has been wanting to get into the games for years, and again, it's mysterious. You don't know how to get in. It just kind of like comes to you. She hears from a supposed winner of one of the old rounds, and he basically warns her and is like, you need to stop the next round from happening. Well, he ends up going missing, and she fails, and the next round starts. People have been dying more recently in this game, so it sounds really good. I honestly never knew what it was about. I just always saw the cover and I was like, hey, that looks cool. And what did I do? I cover bought it, and it actually sounds really cool. The next one I have is Mortog by Christopher Paolini, and this is the newest book in the Inheritance cycle, which book 1 is Aragon. And most people know what this series is about. It's been around for a really long time, but it's essentially a farm boy named Aragon finds a blue stone in the woods, and that blue stone brings along a hatchling dragon. And From there, he and this dragon, with the help of an ancient sword and kind of like a mentor storyteller, have to face the kingdom and this evil king. It sounds great. I've honestly never read them. I always wanted to because, again, for the 5th millionth time, dragons. Next book I got is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This is really popular. I've been wanting to read this. I think one of my book clubs just read it, but I didn't have it. But this follows Tress and her best friend Charlie. She lives on an island, and her best friend Charlie's dad sends him away, and she basically has to leave her island home to go on an adventure to try to find him. And there's pirates and scary stuff, and she has to seek out the sorceress of the Midnight Sea. She needs to go and find. I've heard great things. It's a Sanderson novel. Everyone's hyping it up, so I've always wanted to read it, and I definitely am going to soon, being that I was supposed to read it for a book club not long ago. It is now nighttime. I've had so much technical difficulties today, it's actually driving me crazy, but we figured it out. And we're gonna finish this freaking video. The next book I have is Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. So in this book, we are following Esther, and her entire family, minus her dad, who really won't speak to her now, was all killed by a manticore. So she joins kind of like the army, and she has to bond one of these. Honestly, I don't know how to say what they're called. I would say like they're called rocks, R-O-C-S. I don't know, figure it out. It's fantasy. Everyone says it differently, so don't make fun of me. I'm gonna call them rocks because I'm a geologist and I like rocks. So she has to bond a rock, and they're very like unemotional creatures, so she has to like love and work with this thing, and it's never gonna love her back. But basically, she's on a hunt for revenge. She wants to kill all these manticores. So she goes on one of the nation's biggest manticore hunts, and it ends up being one of the most dangerous. It's a small book. I don't think it's a series of any kind. So I definitely will be reading this, actually, because I like reading little short books in between long ones. So this will definitely be on the list for the year. The next book is Lachlan's by Robert Jackson Bennett, and this is book 3 in the Foundry Side trilogy, book 1 being Foundry Side. So this series in book 1 follows a girl named Sansia, and she is a thief, and she is hired to steal an artifact off of the docks, and it ends up being a very powerful artifact. So the big houses in this world end up coming after her because it's an artifact that if they get their hands on, they can control everything. It sounds like the magic system in this is really cool. It's called scribing, and it's basically the art of imbuing non-living things with magical codes. It freaking sounds cool, very like sci-fi-esque almost. I love a book that cross genres like that. I promise we are almost done, but the next 2 books I have are actually from Book of the Month. The book I picked for January was The Bones Beneath My Skin by TJ Klune. I have been wanting to read one of their books, but I have yet to. They just look so whimsical and cute, and I don't normally read that kind of fantasy, so I'm pretty hyped for it. And this one seems more like a sci-fi fantasy, which, like I just said, I love across genre. So in this book, we follow a character named Nate, and basically his whole family has died, so he returns back to their summer cabin in Oregon, expecting it to be empty, but there's a man in there named Alex. And with Alex is a 10-year-old girl named Artemis Darth Vader, and she's very unique and she has something special about her. So Nate has to decide if he wants to keep living in his past or if he wants to look to the future, because dark forces are descending upon them, and Artemis Darth Vader may just be the key. Tell me that doesn't sound like the cutest, weirdest thing ever. Along with that book, I also picked up Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney, but this basically follows an author named Grady Green, and this is the worst day of his life because he's on the phone with his wife Abby, who is driving, and he hears tires screeching. She slams on the brakes, she stops responding, and so he drives, he finds her car with the door open, the phone call still going, and she's nowhere to be found. Years later, he ends up going, I think it's years later, a year later, he ends up going to a little area in Scotland, and he ends up seeing a woman that looks just like his wife. I don't know. It sounds interesting. Like, where did his wife go? I don't know. I want to know. The next book I also don't physically own. It's supposed to come in the mail tomorrow because while my camera was malfunctioning, what did I do? I used my Amazon credit to buy Eric LaRocca's new book, because he is one of my favorite horror writers ever. I have to literally pull up my phone because I'm like, oh wait, I don't even remember. But it's At Dark I Become Loathsome, and this book just released January 28th and I totally forgot about it. So while I was sitting here upset, I freaking got on Amazon and got it. So it should get here tomorrow and I'm super excited, you guys. Like, actually, he is one of my favorite. I think his writing is the most beautiful thing. It's disgusting and nasty and oh, I just love it. I just love it so much. So I really don't know how to explain this book to you, so I have like the little synopsis pulled up, and it sounds like it's about a guy named Ashley Luton, and he writes on the internet a single line, and it says, "If you're reading this, you've likely thought that the world would be a better place without you." I guess his wife died and his young son died or disappeared, and so he's constructed a peculiar ritual for people who are torn between living and dying, and he comes across his next person he thinks would be interested in the ritual, I guess, and it's a guy named Jinx, and he ends up spinning a giant tale, both revolting and fascinating, and thus begins a relationship that traps the two men in an ever-tightening spiral of painful revelations. Blah 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 blah. And the last sentence, I love these last two sentences. It says, "Only through pain can we find healing. Only through death can we find new life." I love his books, okay? Like, look, I read a lot of fantasy, but on here you're also gonna see me reading the most disgusting, revolting horror books ever, because you have to be twisted in the head to write something like that, and maybe you have to be twisted in the head to also read something like that, but I never claimed I wasn't, so. Anyway, guys, I don't know the total count. I'll have to sit there while I'm editing and count all of them. I think it should be like 57 after I bought that book on Amazon. Thank you guys so much. I'm so sorry this video is so long and I just keep rambling. I keep apologizing and then I keep talking. But I'm gonna actually go now, and I hope you guys all had a wonderful day. I know my day was hectic, so I hope yours was so much better. I also rearranged some of my books while my camera died several times. That's unrelated. Let me just shut up. Anyway, thank you. Have a great day.